welcome. I'm so excited to be a part of this conversation with Dory and Darius today. Again, my name is Emuni Sanderson. I'm an organizer in the criminal justice reform space in the state of Alabama, and also scholar with PhD work focused on the impact of mass incarceration. So again, just excited to be here. Dory, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Great. Thanks so much, Emuni. It's good to see everybody. Good to be with all of you. I'm Dory Miles. I'm a lawyer out of California, but living in Birmingham, Alabama, the last 3 years doing voting rights restoration. I am president of the advisory board of Return My Vote, which we'll talk more about as we get going.
And hi, good morning, everyone. I am Darius Gamble. I am a resident of Alabama. I'm born and raised and educated right there in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Roll Tide. Currently living in Gardendale, Alabama. I am an HR professional by trade.
Well, welcome. Again, we are excited to be a part of this conversation today on voting rights restoration in Alabama. And we really just want to be the ones, of course, for allowing us to participate in this conversation. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. So, while we are all in Alabama, we will be talking about Alabama today, of course, but we also want to recognize just that the fact that felony disenfranchisement and restoring voting rights is not just specific to Alabama, right? It impacts everyone, regardless of where you live. And, just to highlight what is felony disenfranchisement or laws that restricts voting access for those that have been convicted of crimes vary by state. And recently, according to the Sentencing Project, it's estimated 5.2 million American citizens are not allowed to vote because of felony convictions. And as many as 4 million of these folks are living, working, and raising families in our communities, right? But they're still denied the right to vote. And then even more so, 1 of every 16 African American has lost their voting rights due to felony disenfranchisement laws versus 1 in every 59 non-Black voters. So felony disenfranchisement is a real thing, right? And it serves no legitimate purpose. So Dory, Alabama passed a law in 2017 that will restore the rights of returning citizens. Can you tell us briefly what this law was?
Sure. So for 115 years in Alabama, since its Constitution of 1901, where it disenfranchised constitutionally anyone who had been convicted of a crime of moral turpitude. For 115 years, it did not define the term moral turpitude. So literally, it was left up to individual registrars in 67 different counties in Alabama to determine for themselves what constituted a crime of moral turpitude. So literally, a person could commit a crime in Mobile County and lose their voting rights because the registrar said that was a crime of moral turpitude. But in Jefferson County, the registrar might say, with respect to the exact same crime, oh, no problem, you can vote. So this led to an incredibly discriminatory, disparate, unfair, chaotic system. And frankly, Alabama changed its law in 2017 under threat of lawsuit. And the law that the legislature passed to try to avoid being sued for this crazy system was something called the Definition of Moral Turpitude Act. And finally, for the first time, there was a clarification of exactly what crimes constituted moral turpitude, and everybody, for the first time, lived by the same standard. And it was estimated that when that law passed, 300,000 Alabamians immediately had their rights restored the crimes that they had committed were no longer considered crimes of moral turpitude.
Right. Well, this sounds like, a good thing and it'll impact, a lot of people. So it sounds like a good law, right? One that would help
Yes.
thousands of people. But what has happened in Alabama over the last 5 years since that law was passed?
The law was definitely a step in the right direction. No question about that. But also at that time in 2017, the Secretary of State of Alabama explicitly said that he would do nothing to educate anybody in Alabama about the changes. And so what we find now, and what we found for the last 5 years, is that most people, particularly the people most impacted, have no idea that they are eligible to register to vote, or that there may be a pretty simple path to restoration of their voting rights.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dory.
Well, I was going to say, so that's what we do. Return My Vote is a project of Greater Birmingham Ministries and the University of Alabama, a wonderful professor there, Dr. Richard Fording, and several of his students. And we've created a website that anybody, we call it Alabama's Virtual Voting Rights Restoration Clinic. Anybody in Alabama who has a question about their voting eligibility can go to return-my-vote.com and literally make an appointment via video chat, text, email, phone, and talk with somebody who is well-trained in all the nuances of this law, which crimes are on the list of moral turpitude crimes and which ones aren't, and literally get help. Registering to vote if that's what's appropriate, or restoring their voting rights.
Right. And you make so many great points about the work you all are doing, because it's needed. We need to educate folks, right? Because a lot of times we don't often think about like what happens and who is in charge. Okay, these laws are passing, but who is in charge of implementing and how is that being done? And I think this is a really great example. It sounds like a positive thing in what Return My Vote is doing to advance voter access in Alabama. Because the reality is leaders like Secretary of State or county clerks may decide not to prioritize or allocate these resources, or, the law has very little impact then when that happens. And I know you started to talk a little bit about, how many folks this impacts. So talk a little bit more about that.
Well, in Alabama, one thing I discovered is that it is a very punitive state. And so literally 1 out of every 10 Alabamians has a felony conviction. So that is a huge number of people who are potentially thinking mistakenly, in many cases, that they can't vote because they have a felony. And of course, those laws, again, impact African Americans and people of color to a much greater degree than they impact white people. So Blacks in Alabama make up about 27% of the population of the state, yet they make up more than 50% of the people who are disenfranchised. That has to change, just plain and simple. And so I'm proud to say too that in Alabama, Greater Birmingham Ministries works in coordination with many other wonderful groups in the Alabama Voting Rights Coalition. And we're constantly working to literally help person by person restore their voting rights or realize their eligibility to register without anything else. We're also working to change the law and make it better, because right now too, as I said, it was the 2017 law was a step forward, but there are also many, many people who still can't register because they owe fines and fees on a crime of moral turpitude, and that disqualifies them. And we're trying to change that, because we don't think people, particularly poorer people, should have to buy back their voting rights. So that's an area that we're focusing on as well.
Wow. Yeah, return my vote. You all are doing so much, and that's so needed in our state. I know you started to talk a little bit about how the work you all are doing. How can others get involved? Tell us a little bit more about the work, like the intentionality of your work to fill some of these gaps that you're seeing in Alabama, and how people can get involved.
I'm a volunteer. We love volunteers. There is plenty to do. As I say, this law impacted potentially 300,000 people. Alabama's a small state. You were saying that, 5.2 million people nationally are disenfranchised. Well, the entire population of Alabama is about 5 million people. So, 300,000 people represents a very big proportion of our citizenry. So, and we would like to reach every single one of those people to make sure they have the correct information about their voting rights. And so people can email me at gbmvotes@gbm.org, or they can access the website return-my-vote.com. They can call me at 205-304-0481. I would be happy to speak with them and share the various opportunities. We go out to the field offices of the Alabama Board of Pardons and Paroles, speak with people who are reporting to their parole officers or probation officers, and talk to them about voting. And many of them are eligible because they're reporting on a crime that is not a crime of moral turpitude, like drug-related convictions in Alabama. If a person has any drug-related conviction except trafficking, that person is eligible to register to vote.
Yeah, and I know I'll probably ask a question about that later. But let's go into talk to you, Darius. You were introduced to Return My Vote in 2014. Share with us a little about your journey up to this point and connecting with Return My Vote in 2014.
Gotcha. Good morning, everyone. Well, first, I would first have to give you the context of the backstory if you could pull it all together. So my life changed in February of 2006. That was when, as Dory just mentioned, I caught a trafficking in marijuana charge. I eventually pleaded out in February of 2008. When I play it out, it was a sentence of 10 split 3. That means 10 years being, you have 10 years to serve. However, they're going to suspend it, have to serve 3 of them, and then you do 5 years on probation. It only adds up to 8. Why they call it 10 split 3, I have no idea, but that's Alabama. So in a nutshell. Subsequently, I was released in 2009. Also, along with my plea agreement, there was a $50,000 fine with a 30% collection fee if it wasn't paid in full in 2016. So fast forward, I get out in July of 2009, started working in September of 2009. At the same time, paying either $50 or $25 toward probation towards these fines and fees. Did the whole time without any additional incident. At this time, I'm actually building a career. I'm working for a Fortune 500 company, and I'm transitioning from entry-level position into the HR space. Came off probation in July of 2014. Following month, I said, hey, my probation been paying my fines and fees. I am going to register to vote. So registered online, didn't receive anything back. So I said, okay, maybe they didn't receive the first one. Let me register again. Registered online. And so later on that month, and well, the following month in September, that's when I got the aha moment from the Alabama Pardons and Parole And the later letter stated, I must have paid off all of your court fees, fines, restitution, and probation fees before I'm able to register to vote. At that point in time, I owed $49,341. So I was like really discouraged for whatever reason. I was like, okay, well, just continue to find out, figure it out, because voting was really important to me and still is important to me. So around 2014, 2015, I heard an ad about voter restoration in regards to felony. So I was like, okay, let me explore this. It was held at a barber shop by a guy named Jonathan Blocker. Met with him, kind of told him, hey, this is what's going on with my story. This is my roadblock, meaning the fee. He was like, come meet me at my office. After a couple meetings with him, he was like, hey, you've already pretty much done all the work, and everything that I have access to, you've already done. But let me introduce you to this other group out of DC. It was CLC. So he introduced me to them in 2014. Introduced with them, they're kind of filling out the case, kind of like, okay, yeah, the roadblock or the obstacle in your case is this fines and fee. So we'll figure something out. So in 2016, I got a call from Shelby County. That's where the case was originally at. And it was from the DA's office in regards to the 30% collection fee. And they had notified me that my $50,000 fine was now $63,000 because of that $30,000 collection, 30% collection fee. So I was like, okay, let me just pay it, continue to pay it each month. But I was feeling really like I'll never pay this amount off. I don't have a spare of $63,000 in regards to it. So that was in 2016. In 2017, with the guidance from CLC, I filed for a pardon and remissions. At the same time, continue to pay off debt. And for a couple of years, I didn't hear anything. It was just lights out, didn't hear anything regarding where my case was with pardons and remissions. So at that point in time, I just started calling people. And I was finally found out, I reached someone, Mr. Carpenter in pardons and parole, and he told me that Shelby County was the one that was holding up, meaning they were not communicating with the pardons and parole in regards to whether they opposed me getting a pardon or remission of fees. So at that point in time, I just went on a letter writing campaign. I was writing the DA, I was writing the judge and the circuit clerk, one letter a week to each one of them. I was like, it's only costing me a price of a stamp. I was using the same template. I have a little system, and I'll just put on here first attempt, second attempt, third attempt. And so apparently they got tired of either receiving the letters, and they turned those letters, and the only thing in the letters were asking were, hey, communicate with partners, bro, so I can get this, this chapter moved on or move things to the next step. Well, they turned that letter into a motion. So now I'm going back to court. I'm like, why am I going back to court? This thing at this point in time. So it was a good thing in a sense, because of those letters, they somehow, and I'm not exactly sure what happened in court, but they reduced the fine from $63K to $28K, which is good, but at the same time, to me, it was symbolic for the simple fact that I'm no closer to voting. So with that said, the case eventually was turned over to another caseworker at Pardons and Parole, which was Mrs. Taylor. And just kind of building rapport and kind of what's going on with her, she's telling me, hey, I think you need to go ahead and present your case to Pardons and Parole. And I'm like, no. At that point in time, I had gotten guidance from a lot of individuals in regards to dealing with these remissions and pardons, and no one with a fines and fees have received a pardon in a sense from the Alabama Board of Pardons and Parole because of the fees, and naturally wouldn't remit them. So I was like, no, we're not going to do it. So I was getting her to just hold it off. At that time, I was somehow, 2018, I was introduced to you, Dory, and she kind of gave me a light of hope. And I was like, okay, fine. So she set up a meeting with another organization, and I thought this organization had some contacts in regards to Shelby County. And I was like, okay, we're going to get, the good old boy system. Hopefully, we'll work something out. And that meeting, it just didn't develop. And so at that time, I was just truly just like, I give up. I truly do give up. I'll just continue to pay these fees. I have a good career, I have a good life. But at the same time, it was just bothering me that I couldn't vote, especially with all this nonsense that's going on in politics. So I was like, everyone has told me no, except for the people that really matter, which is the Alabama Pardons and Parole. So talking with Taylor, she was like, look, you've done a lot of work in regards to your personal life, your professional life. Like I say, I'm currently in HR. The company in which I was previously employed for and currently employed with, we have a reentry program in which we actually seek out individuals with felonies as far as employment, giving them that second chance. It's just like, just tell your story. Whatever your story is, just tell it. And I was like, okay, fine. So under the radar, I didn't notify Dory or CLC or any family members. September the 1st of this year, went before the board, got the notice, went down. They started 8 o'clock, so I arrived around 7:30. And for whatever reason, I don't know if they were slow or it's just how the normal speed is, but I didn't go before the board until like 2:30, 3 o'clock. And as they're ushering us in, they say, yeah, you're going to have 2 minutes to kind of tell your case to the three panel board. And I'm thinking to myself, 2 minutes? Nah, they finna get a true story from me. So with that said, they go through the first individual and they tell their case and they talk for probably about a good minute, minute and a half. And then they say, hey, Darius, come up. And from there, I just told them, I think I spoke with the board for probably about 20 to 25 minutes. But they didn't cut me off. They kept inquiring. I kept asking questions and pointing out, hey, this is what I've done. This is what I'm currently doing. Hey, these are the receipts in regards to I've been paying this thing for 7, 8 years at this point in time. And so with that said, later on after after they deliberated, they did grant me the right to vote. They didn't do a full pardon, but they did give me the right to vote back. So with that said, I registered to vote last week. So I'll be voting for the first time since 2008 in about 29 days.
Well, that's exciting.
Absolutely.
That's very exciting. So I guess just briefly, because we have just a few more minutes, but your story is so powerful. I can't, end this panel without saying, what was that experience like for you? And just kind of tell us, why do you feel so strongly about voting? Why is that important to you?
Well, once again, I was always a voter, a registered voter. But when I lost the power to vote, I actually felt less than a citizen. I felt like I was an outcast. I felt like I was a second or third class citizen, like I was just powerless. And I've always worked in kind of like an office environment. Like I said, I worked for Fortune 500 companies. And I was always just felt so ashamed when my coworkers or peers would come back and they always had that sticker or I voted. And they were like, hey, Darius, when are you going to vote or what else? And I just kind of never answered that question. But I just felt less than. I was like, if nothing else, before I pass away from this here earth, I will be voting again.
No, that's powerful. I can just imagine, Thankfully, I've always had the access to vote, but the disenfranchisement for African Americans in the state of Alabama, it impacts us all. So I can only imagine having that level of disenfranchisement, what that did to you personally. So I really appreciate you sharing your story, not just with me and Dory, or Be the Ones, but with everyone, because it needs to be out there and people need to understand what's going on and how they can be involved and help. So again, thank you to Dory. The information you provided, it's powerful, so people can get involved and really make a change in what's happening in our state. I know we do not have time for questions, but yeah, let's, if you want to be more involved with Return My Votes, Kate has provided more information and link to be able to learn more about the incredible work they're doing, and if you need any help on having your rights restored. If anyone has questions, Kate just put in the chat box, please send them here and we'll get them answered and get you more information.
Thanks so much, Emuni and Darius. Really appreciate being able to talk with both of you.